Hello everyone, I am Grandmaster Denes Boros, and today we're going to learn how to counter the Queen's Gambit with the most daring ways. First off is the Goosef Gambit. The Goosef Gambit is when instead of dealing with the c4 pawn, you give a pawn yourself with c5. C takes d5, and excitingly enough, this counter gambit involves another pawn sacrifice, the knight f6, pressing on the d5 pawn. Now, normally, white plays knight f3, just ignoring it, but if white would ever take, then there is queen takes d5, knight takes d5, and after e4, black can go knight b4 and set up very nasty threats on c2 and get good counterplay for the sacrificed pawn. Therefore, usually white goes knight f3, c takes d4, knight takes d4, knight takes d5. A logical sequence. Black actually played knight f6 so he could capture with the knight. g3, planning to get the bishop to g2 and put pressure on black's position that way. However, this runs into black's very exciting idea of e5, gaining space and chasing the knight away. Knight b5, bishop b4 check. So whenever you play counter gambits, you always aim on quick development, and now bishop b4 actually does that job perfectly, as black is just ready to go and castle short as quickly as possible. Bishop d2, but bishop d2 feels a little clumsy, and the black player, who's a grandmaster, decides to go a6 here, just bothering that knight. Bishop b4, knight takes b4, knight d6 check. And even though this knight looks annoying, white is actually underdeveloped and not quite ready to take advantage of the unfortunate placement of the king. After king e7, which is a very brave move by the black grandmaster, white is forced to move the knight, otherwise it is taken by black. But afterwards, suddenly black has plenty of threats of forking white in this position. Knight c3, rook d8, queen b3, and it all seems very comfortable for white until black plays queen c4, which is a beautiful, beautiful queen sacrifice. It is actually taboo, because after queen c4, knight c2 is a smothers checkmate. The king cannot run away, and the king is blocked in by the bishop and the two pawns. So white is actually forced to stop that threat. Queen takes b3, a takes b3, knight c6, and soon after black got the advantage in a game played by Arnason playing black, as black is going to take over and attack those pawns, black is the one who's pushing for a win. This is the Goosef Gambit, a very interesting variation, not very well known, but I do advise you to try it out. Second on our list is the Chigorin-Lazard Gambit, which starts with c4, knight c6, which is the Chigorin, but instead of going the normal Chigorin way with bishop g4, black plays e5 instead. This is very much like the Albin variation, which it would actually transpose into if white decides to take with the pawn after d4. This is the Albin variation. However, knight takes e5 makes it that it's unique to itself. Knight takes e5, d takes e5, d4. So by all means, very much in the spirit of the Albin, black is giving up a pawn, but make sure that development is tough on white. So here the main move is g3. Gustafsson, a famous grandmaster, however, played e3 here. And bishop b4 check is actually put him into a big and troublesome spot. But coming back to g3, here black can choose knight e7, which is a very strong move. After bishop g2, knight c6, castles, knight takes c5. Surprisingly, the game would transpose back again to the Albin variation, but much about that a bit later. So e3 was played in this game, trying to undermine the center, but as in the Albin variation, it's not that good here because of the same concept of bishop b4 check, bishop d2, and d takes e3. Now, bishop takes b4 is not working here because e takes f2 check. The king needs to guard the lady. If you take, queen takes d1, and black is just up a whole queen. And if king e2, there's bishop g4 check, winning the lady over there. So white was forced to play queen a4 check, bishop d7, queen takes b4, e takes d2, knight takes d2, knight e7, the usual maneuver known from the Alban. And because white is still sort of scattered and underdeveloped, black definitely has good compensation. And after bishop e2, knight c6, queen c3, queen g5. Here, black had very good play. So, the Chigorin-Lazard, if you're very interested in playing something similar to the Alban, but not quite the Alban, this should be your choice. The next one up is the Albin variation, where you actually, instead of dilly-dallying, you go instead with e5 immediately. D takes e5, d4. Now, d4 has been played exclusively, however, I have came up with the idea of knight e7 and bishop e6 as well. So if you are of adventurous nature, you might want to try any of those and might have some talk on that in the future. So look out for that one. In any case, d4 is the main line. Knight f3, knight c6, and if g3, which is the main variation, then black can go knight e7, knight g6, knight takes e5, and if you remember the game I just recalled a second ago, this transposes directly back to the variation we looked at in the Chigorin-Lazard Gambit. So this is a direct transposition. But here in this game, white played a3, which is another critical move, knight e7, the very, very good maneuver, trying to get rid of that e-pawn, and then black would have a good position with more space and better piece control. b4, knight g6, corralling that pawn, bishop e2, a5, just creating some weaknesses. b5, knight c5, bishop takes d4. Knight takes e5 is the main line and has been played multiple times. Knight takes c5 follows, bishop d4, knight takes c4, e3, bishop e6, defending the knight, queen c2, knight c6, bishop d3, queen g5, leading to a very, very sharp game played between Gelfand and Morozevich. And if you are a big fan of Morozevich, do check out his games in the Albin and he'll show you the way how to play it. Now in this game, bishop takes d4 happened between Voigt and Stukopen. Knight takes f3, which is a little bit of an inaccuracy, but you'll still have to know how to refute it. White chose g takes f3, but even if white goes e takes f3, black has this beautiful move of bishop d6, getting ready to develop either castle long or castle short, depending on what white does. If bishop g7, then there's rook g8, and black gets very good play for the pawn. And then queen e7, bishop e6 with a long queenside castling. And if white goes bishop e2, short castles, and even though the position seems fairly quiet, in fact, white is in big trouble because of the beautiful bishop h3, which white cannot take, because queen g5 check, king h1, queen f4, and the mate is unstoppable on h2. And if white goes bishop e3, trying to stop these attacks, then black is still roaming with this attack. Rook here, knight h4, this is still untakeable, because check and checkmate. Therefore, black is actually doing quite well. Even if white goes king h1, black has this idea of taking, check, king h1, queen f4 with the same checkmate. So here black had to face g takes f3 because white feared this attack. bishop e6. A very good move by Stukopen, not only attacking the c-pawn, but getting ready to castle long. e3, queen h4, knight d2, long castles, b6, rook takes d4. With white's pieces being very much underdeveloped, Stukopen takes the chance to seize the initiative. E takes, queen takes d4. And even though white is up with some material advantage in exchange, a rook for the bishop, black has the bishop pair and a much better pawn structure. Knight e4, queen b6. Obviously, black is going to avoid the exchanges because he is going for the attack. Rook b1, queen c6, c5, bishop d5. Pressing as the king is still stuck in the middle. Check. King b8, knight c3, bishop c4. A very, very strong move, making sure that this king is stuck in the middle there and doesn't have enough time to run away. Queen d8, king a7, bishop d7. But this is already losing because black's pieces are swarming the king, and Stukopen is a couple of moves away just to activate all of his pieces, the bishop and the rook. Queen takes c7, but this one's already losing. Takes, king d1, check, queen c2, check, king g2, check, f3. And after queen c2, white resigned for a good reason, because after king g3, black can just go queen takes c5 and claim victory with much more pieces than white has. So if you are of an adventurous nature, like to counterattack, one of the lines that I would suggest you is the Albin counter gambit, where you can go for quick attacks. There are some downsides. Oftentimes, you will be forced to defend an endgame, but if you get an attack, you can just demolish your opponent, just like as it happened in this game. But last and not least, I wanted to mention the Shara Gambit, which is d4, d5, c4, e6, knight c3, c5, c takes d5, and c takes d4. This one is different from the other ones. The Albin and the Chigorin-Lazard was more focused on gaining space and then gaining an attack, some momentum, but the Shara Gambit is more about getting development immediately, even at a cost of a pawn. Queen a4 check, bishop d7, queen takes d4, e takes d5, takes, knight c6. So notice white has been wasting a lot of moves just to win a pawn. Meanwhile, black actually got some development in exchange. Also, that queen on d5 will be chased away. Knight f3, knight f6. A very important move, chasing the queen away. Queen d1, bishop c5. Once black sacrifices a pawn, is claiming that in the long run, the development will count for something. That's why black is going the most active placements. Bishop b4 would also be an option. e3, queen e7, preparing the long castles, the sharpest move possible. a3, long castles. Queen c2, g5. Now, this game was played by the famous Romanian and German Grandmaster Nishipeanu versus Brown Orek, both of them Grandmasters. Here, Nishipeanu is immediately launching an attack, sort of anticipating white to castle that side. Bishop e2, g4, knight d2, king b8. A very, very nice positional move by Nishipeanu, trying to avoid any tactical tricks on the c-file. b4, bishop b6, knight c4, bishop c7. Now, Nishipeanu values those bishops, as these can actually put some heavy pressure on white's position later on. Bishop b2, knight e5. Sort of anticipating white to castle and change his mind and castle long, but for that, there is rook c8 lurking, and that's why king b8 was such a great move by Nishipeanu. Knight takes c5, bishop takes c5, castles. Already, if white would have castled long, black could go rook c8 with heavy pressure on the c file. Short castles, rook c8 anyways, pinning the queen, rook c1, h5. Classical Sicilian attack. Black is trying to pierce through with g3 and h4. Rook d1, g3, a typical sacrifice, and you cannot really take it because that would open up the file for the rook with decisive threats. f3, and here Nishipanu played h4, which is a good move, still leading to attacking chances. However, the stronger move, bishop takes c3. Bishop takes c3, queen takes c3, king h1, knight g4 already would have led to a decisive attack. Bishop takes, rook takes h8, and impossible as it may seem, white really does not have any ways of stopping this attack without losing further material. And in case of h3, there is g takes h3 with decisive threats, as queen f2 is coming as well. So if here takes, queen f2 is checkmate. So I really hope you enjoyed this lecture on counter gambits versus the Queen's Gambit. So if you're interested in something like this in the future, do let me know in the comments below. And if you liked it, please leave a like, and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next time.